we are 20 plus years into Wi-Fi as a technology, and the clients are the general state of the clients is kind of astounding. The things that we're going to talk about. It's kind of why we have endless dashboards, and a lot of what keeps the help desk busy, and a lot of a lot of why good Wi-Fi networks get bad raps. It's just there's so much to talk about here. One thing I want to point out about me, that third bullet down, I am a geezer. I've been doing this for a long time. And the only reason I highlight that is because, I go back to 802.11, 802.11b. I've been active in it, not just aware of it, but I've been active in it for that many years, which means I have seen a lot. In no way, shape, or form do I know it all, nor do I profess to, but I can certainly share my experience and the things that I have learned and observed and opinions that I've formed along the way, doing Wi-Fi networks, both very large all the way down to very small. Just, the longer you're in the game, the more you see. So that's where I'm coming from. Client devices, get right into it. The dumpster fire gets overplayed, but it's kind of obligatory when it comes to wireless clients. So let's just get that right out there to set the tone. And the next slide, again, is also, at least in my mind, absolutely necessary. So it's so silly. It's so childish, but it's so easy to just delight in, at least for somebody who's a child inside like I am, and regardless of those horrible ladies on the left and the cute / mean cat on the right and the veggies, other than this whole thing just being nonsensical and getting overused in so many different memes. Think about what I put there in the captions. Your Wi-Fi sucks. Oh yeah, your devices suck. Point counterpoint. There is so much here that you spend so much time building, designing, deploying. Good, factually good, empirically good Wi-Fi networks, and then devices show up in their various states, and all of a sudden that great network just doesn't feel so great anymore. It's just it is a fact that we're stuck with. That's what we're going to talk about today. So the initial ranting and the memes aside, the fact that we just have this, what I'm calling tremendous variability out there in the client market when it comes to what they can and can't do, it's really rather astounding. If you kind of contrast 802.11 with another standard like 802.3, which is Ethernet, for those who are maybe bubbling up that fact, you just don't see this nonsense, not even a fraction of it, with Wi-Fi or with Ethernet devices. The standard is fairly clean, fairly concise, whether you're talking about the original 802.3 with 10 megabits, or you're talking about fast Ethernet, gigabit Ethernet, whatever. As 802.3 has evolved, the wording, the specifications, they're all, to use the word concise again, they're all pretty concise. There's not a lot of fluff for doing things different ways among client devices. We just don't have that cleanness when it comes to wireless. So the word variability, it's just pervasive in the wireless client market, at least in my opinion. Certainly on the Windows side, can take Apple out of the driver situation, but on the Windows side, you still have, the device itself is made by one vendor, the computing device. The wireless NIC from Broadcom or Intel, and now you've got something that wasn't made by vendor A getting bolted up to vendor B's thing. whatever. Hopefully you get what I'm saying. Things are kludged together, cobbed together. The driver is the magic in the middle. If the OS gets too far out of date from the wireless adapter, you got to go and, upload a new driver and hope that you found the right one. It's still a fact of life. And again, after these 20 some odd years, drivers are still a thing. I see more and more, the client devices that are just developed by people who seemingly have no grasp on the environments where they want to deploy them. I'm talking about things like wireless time clocks and utility devices, like maybe the laundry appliances that have built-in Wi-Fi, and where the vendors see building controls, where the vendors see their products getting deployed. They just have no concept of what really goes on in these, business grade environments. It's just very strange. And then you end up looking at their requirements and having sometimes spirited discussions with them about, what you're saying you need, it just doesn't work. And here's why. And, it's, just astounding in itself. In my opinion, if anybody's ever heard me speak out at a conference or whatever, or sat with me, just talked on the side at any of these events, or read some of my articles, this whole consumer versus enterprise thing, we'll talk about it more today, but there is a huge gap between how enterprise wireless is run and what goes on, on the residential side. So when I say consumer, it's basically residential, maybe SMB, but as opposed to big wireless. There is absolutely a gap there, and that's problematic when we talk about clients. And then our wireless LAN overlords, they really aren't doing us any favors. We're going to talk about them first thing. So start off with the IEEE. Hopefully everybody knows they're the group that actually develops the standards, the FCC and the FCC's equivalent agencies around the world. They set the wireless regulatory framework, but the IEEE, not the Wi-Fi Alliance, but the IEEE actually sets the 802.11 standards. I know the Wi-Fi Alliance can, add to it and enhance it and all of that, but the IEEE is where the gospel of the standards come from. And I ask, do they have any clue whatsoever about how their approach impacts the real world? This ongoing fascination with backwards compatibility. They put out this standard, and you're going to get gigabits of throughput. Yeah, but you got to be backwards compatible with earlier standards. And when you do that, you no longer get your gigabits of throughput that we're supposed to be getting you so excited about. It's just all over the place with priority and impact if you deploy one part of the standard, what it does to the other, and a lot of that is not called out clearly. And then the lessons that should be learned as they put out one standard after another. We're going to talk about some of that. For example, put out a standard with lots of optional features, and then put out another standard with lots of optional features. And the confusion comes from the optional features. It's like, when do we stop doing this and tighten it up? And like I say, we'll talk more about this, but the IEEE, again, I don't think they're really in touch with the impact of how they're doing their standards, how that impact is felt out in the world when it comes to clients. And mention the Wi-Fi Alliance. They do a lot of good things. This is not meant to be totally a slam, nor am I slamming totally the IEEE. Fantastic agencies for what they've given us to date, but it's also easy to find fault, at least from where I sit. And not a wholesale cutting down either of them, nor am I a cheerleader for either of them. If you zoom out and factually apply some critical thought to both of them, it's like, you're kind of killing us in a lot of ways. So the keepers of interoperability that the Wi-Fi Alliance fancies themselves to be, that notion of interoperability, as somebody who keeps wireless networks going and designs them and has to reconcile, all the endless problems that come from clients, I can't help but feel like the Alliance, their notion of interoperability is just really, really stunted. And that lack of a good, meaningful, real world definition creates a lot of problems. One of the easier ones to point at is there's no interoperable, no standard, no testing for every device should roam the same way. That in itself is a problem, and we'll talk about other ones, but it's an easy one to point at. It's like interoperability is such a small subset that they test for. A lot of the important stuff never makes it. And I'm just going to say again, that last bullet, the fact that this group versus any of the others, the fact that they don't come out with some clean label on the product. This is Wi-Fi consumer. This other thing is Wi-Fi enterprise. And to me, it would be so easy to do that, and the benefits to doing that would just be incredibly huge. It would make so many problems go away, or at least easier to talk about, and all of that. The fact that they don't do it, to me, really undermines especially the enterprise side of things in just a huge way. And again, more to come on all of this. So we talked about the IEEE Wi-Fi Alliance, their parts, and the fact that our overall client situation is kind of as bad as it's always been, for lack of a better descriptor. Then there's also, the fact that we own part of the problem, we being the people who are doing wireless. I ask of you, do we support anything and everything that end users want to put on the enterprise wireless? We have to make a decision. I do know people who bend over backwards to take the left path off of the diamond, and anything people want, we're going to support. And that can lead to the things that I list there. Great that you can do all of the stupid human tricks that make these problematic devices work, or you can say no and get network stability. And arguably none of us can live in the real world. It's hard to live on either side. It's hard to be totally yes and totally no. That alone I'm going to talk about. But if you boil it down to the simplest, if you got a problem device and you choose not to accommodate it, your network is going to tend to be a lot more stable. Unfortunately, there's a lot of the really cool products, cool clients are on the left, and that's what we're dealing with when they come to town on the enterprise Wi-Fi network. So, our accommodation, our creativity, our ability to solve the problem of problematic clients is in and of itself a problem that contributes to the client market just not getting better. We find ways to accommodate them. Again, this is just the reality of the wireless day to day. So what does it all translate to in the real world? Well, there's almost nothing that supports 802.1x for a lot of classes of device. So most of the utility stuff, they can't do enterprise wireless security. Very hard to find a printer that can do 802.1x. There are a few out there. They're few and far between. We got a lot of printers out there in the enterprise, and most of them can't do the security that we would like them to do. I have recently I got wind of a device that's having great trouble using the network, a brand new device. It wanted the 802.11b rates turned back on. That ain't happening. You bought a bad device. I'm sorry. This is maybe what you should have bought, or we can work with the vendor to have them upgrade the magic that's underneath the hood, but that ain't happening. We're not going back to 802.11b. You know, I also was dealing with a couple of different Macs, and the users were trying to figure out, why one of them is getting, 25 megabit better data rate than the other. Came down to the guard interval, started picking apart the two different machines, and it's like, well, why? They're both Apple devices, they're both Macs, different generations, etc. But why did they choose to do long guard interval versus short? I have no idea. It's just what Apple chose, but it manifested in different speeds. The whole notion of beam forming, one of those optional things, you try to use it. If it's even available in the feature set, the vendor immediately tells you to turn it off when you have trouble. We paid for it. It's promised in the standard. Why can't we use it? Well, because the clients aren't ready for it, and it causes trouble. It's just crazy. Band steering. I saw this one for myself. I had a laptop. Try to use band steering, which is not an 802.11 thing. It's something vendors do in their own ways. I had a laptop that did just fine. Unfortunately, somebody at the C level would drop 20 pings and it would come back for 20 pings. Drop 20 pings, come back for 20 pings. That was the end of band steering in that experiment. It's not a standards-based thing. Some clients don't know what to do with it. I've seen firmware upgrades on specific devices, and all of a sudden, after years of good service, the clients don't work right. And that was just because of a firmware upgrade. It's like, okay, what happened in there in the client firmware that caused all of this? Or the AP firmware, for that matter. Sometimes you go that route and you upgrade the infrastructure side, and all of a sudden a whole class of clients is out the window. It just kind of reflects that the standards themselves are maybe less than polished, if you will. So one of my favorite examples of the problem, I remember the client problem. I remember that seeing it was actually in a print magazine when Chromecast first came out as a device. And the headline was something like, "It's as at home in the boardroom as it is in the living room." Yeah, and that does apply as long as the boardroom is in your garage and you're running it off of a Linksys router, maybe. It should be so easy. Look at that simple diagram of how a Chromecast works. All right, no mystery to it. Now take that Chromecast away from your home, take it to work, and look at how many pages are in this deployment guide for Chromecast. 36 pages later, and a lot of things you probably don't want to do to your network, you might get that Chromecast working in the enterprise. Now, kudos to, this is a Cisco document, kudos to them for making it work, but do you really want to? It's an important question. Yeah, we can do it, but when you see what's in this document, I'm telling you, you very much may not want to, depending on the way your wireless network is set up and the stability that you want to guarantee and all of that. It's just, another example of the all-overness of the wireless clients. Some more things I've seen and heard within the last 18 months. Somebody brings a device to my environment, it's going to need its own SSID. Different device, going to need its own SSID and its own VLAN. And on that same one, oh no, we actually need 2 SSIDs, and this was for a piece of fitness equipment. You got to be out of your friggin' minds. We have to restrict our client devices to one specific AP. You've got 100 in the building, maybe 20 on this floor. We need you to make sure that our client can only talk to one. We need the LAN and the wire and the local network and the Wi-Fi to be in common IP space. Can't do IP routing, and oh, by the way, it's got to be a /24. And we have to be in 192.168. This is an actual device that came to our business network, and that was one of the requirements. The whole notion of multicast can be done, but again, depending on your environment, you may not want to. May or may not. Depends on where you are and policies and all kinds of other things. What else is going on the network? I'm not alone in always being surprised. When Wi-Fi 6 was new, we all had to turn off the features. This is across all kinds of leading vendors' equipment. For clients to work, you couldn't have Wi-Fi 5 clients that would work if they saw Wi-Fi 6. It's like, really? This is on the client side. It's just crazy. The latest NIC drivers aren't working. Sometimes you have to go back. You have to go back sometimes 2 or 3 or 4 versions suddenly. Something happened in the operating system. You got to go back and find an old driver to make the client work. So this is just some of how it feels. The whole all over the place. The whole lack of. I'll just say it. Lack of good standards, well-written standards, well-implemented standards, well-received standards, the willingness to abide by those standards. We just don't have any of that ubiquitously in the client space. It is what it is. So, I say, yeah, we're stuck with it. It's easy to rant about it. Kind of as I'm doing. It's easy to complain about it. It's easy to call it out into the light of day. And it really needs to be addressed, because otherwise we're just blaming the network for everything. So as I say in the first bullet, we are stuck with it. It's not going to change. If you think about what Wi-Fi is practically, it really is, endless trade-offs. The whole notion of if this, then that, those narratives. Yeah, this will work, but you got to do that. And the penalty is you won't get as much throughput. If you want to hit the top end, you have to do all of this other stuff. That is our reality. That is our facts of life in the wireless world. The marketing departments absolutely love the chaos because they find the potentials in the standard, and that's what they market. You're buying a Wi-Fi 6 EAP. These are all the things that the standard says you might get out of Wi-Fi 6E. So we are going to advertise it as if that was what you were actually going to get, and we're also going to price it accordingly. You are buying hype and promise, and that comes at a premium. And of course, when you get the thing into your environment, you can't do half of what we hype up and promise. But by golly, it was all worth it, and everybody wins except you. I mentioned the powers that be, the IEEE and the Wi-Fi Alliance. A lot of what they do sometimes is confounding. Like I would have loved to see the Wi-Fi Alliance maybe not put so much time and energy and resources into coming up with numbers like Wi-Fi 4 and 5 and 6, and maybe they could have taken that energy and devoted it to better interoperability testing. Like curmudgeon-y voice says, but and the reality too, the last part of that third bullet, we hope for the best, but we know we can't shut the doors that allow the worst to come in. We just can't have it all. We can't sometimes have our cake and eat it too, or we're not allowed to eat the entire piece. Pick any variation of that cliche you want, and it's just not what it should be. It's not what it could be. And then I rhetorically ask, does this feel like standards are really in play? They are the loosest standards of anything I have ever seen. The Wi-Fi standards are. They're just kind of crazy. So what can we do about it? The current state of the, client disarray. What can we do as people who run and design wireless networks other than rant about it and listen to me rant about it? What can we actually do? Well, the old another cliche, it is what it is. We can only control what we can control. We have to understand the feature sets that we're dealing with, which ones are standards based, which ones aren't. And again, band steering, classic example. It is not written into any 802.11 standard. Band steering is not. So when you choose to take a chance on a non-standards based feature, I'd spend a lot of time examining whether it's actually working the way it's supposed to globally or whether it's causing trouble in different places. When I say you don't want to be the no store, nor do you have to be yes men. Somebody comes to you, I want to put this on the enterprise Wi-Fi, and your first reaction might be, nope, doesn't fit, and here's why. You can do that so long, but you can't do it every time. Otherwise, people are going to start finding their own workarounds, and they're going to be putting in parallel networks because all you say is no, and they really want to use this thing. At the same time, you don't have to say yes to everything. You can actually turn devices away. You can suggest alternatives, which I'll talk about. But to me, it's pretty important that as a general rule, network stability should be the thing that you're paying the most attention to, rather than trying to accommodate every goofy client that comes in the door. So if I use this, what's it going to do to stability? If I put this one client that 5 people want to use in play, what's that going to do to the other 5,000 people that are using the network? And there can absolutely be a butterfly effect when you start making changes, for specialty devices that are only going to be used off in the corner of the network. You just have to think about it all holistically. When the devices do come knocking on the door, they have really weird requirements. At least in my world, it's very important. I kind of take a look at the documentation. Sometimes I talk with the vendor who's selling the thing and tell them what my concerns are, and if we can't negotiate a good fit, explain to the end user that wants to use it why it's not a good fit and help them find alternatives. There are a whole bunch of applications, a whole bunch of things end users want to do with Wi-Fi that are actually a much better fit on low RAWAN, for example. And being a wireless person, it's okay to point out a better technology or a better way of doing something that's still going to fit the goal. And that's becoming ever more important as the new technologies come out. So, what can we do? Well, we can flex when we can do it safely, and we can also know when we have to draw lines. All of this is within our control. Sometimes it's not comfortable, but it is what it is. Again, the controlling what we can, good design helps with problem clients. Good design helps everything. That's the backdrop to pretty much anything with wireless. Good design, better chances of things being good, even when the things that we're trying to, even when the things in play may not be the best design. Good design will help them too. The effective monitoring of the environment, got to know what's going on. Even if it's a dashboard you're not glued to every day, because thankfully you did a good job and your wireless network works well and you don't have to get into it until it's time to troubleshoot, whatever. When you need to know what's going on at a deeper level, having a good monitoring system is absolutely critical. Following the rhythm of client operating system updates and subsequent problems. Everybody just went to iOS 17. Suddenly, this crazy stuff is happening across the network. Those little nuances are important. It's Patch Tuesday in the Windows land. A whole bunch of machines got updated, and now something is going on the wireless side. That can be pretty telling, and that can help you to know where to go solve your problem. And it's usually not on the wireless side. It's usually on the client side. Usually. There are exceptions. One big thing I see people do too often, the notion of knee-jerk changes on the wireless. Well, the CIO had some problem. It was bad. He was really all hacked off, and he's walking around just, something's got to change to fix what was going on with his iPad. And suddenly you're in the system because a name got dropped, and you're tweaking timers that shouldn't be tweaked and changing radio thresholds and stuff. Not good. Slow down. figure out what's really going on and don't make changes for the sake of changes because you're dealing with problematic devices. And I already mentioned the alternate technologies like the LoRaWAN example. And there are others. That's not the only one. Some things are better off wired. And that'll always be the case, in my opinion. Everything doesn't have to go on Wi-Fi. Even though we're Wi-Fi people, there are better technologies to use for some devices. And then the bottom two, as we get to the end of this, just realizing how all over the place the clients are in reality. That alone should be a factor that you never lose sight of when you're troubleshooting. And the reason I say that, I got a wireless problem I'm dealing with right now in a building and in a room. Okay, 2 iOS devices are having the problem. A bunch of Windows devices are not. They're all connected to the same access point on the same bigger wireless LAN. Let's look at those clients before I start doing goofy things on the network itself, because clients are just disparate when it comes to how they're put together. When it comes to what's ticking away under their hoods, they are just different. So we have to pay attention to that. And finally, the business Wi-Fi, the enterprise, right? It just can't flex in all of the ways that clients might demand. The disparity in the client market, the way I've painted it, you can't bring all of this stuff to the wireless network and meet all of the goofy demands. You just can't. You can't implement, if you were to bring one of everything in, there is no way in the world, or very few ways in the world, that you're going to be able to meet all of their needs and make the wireless network still function. But that chaos is yours to manage. If you run the network, it's yours to figure out what you can do, what you can't do. And that's kind of where we are. I mean, that is what it is. So there's no answers to be had here. Just a series of observations and some griping, and that's about what it comes down to. That is where we are. And